This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Next on the 5 o'clock report.
Mosques just crumble. We know that there were worshippers inside.
We cannot have a strong country if we have sick citizens.
A lot of people who come to the food bank here that don't have automobiles. So we need something here in town people can walk to.
Now, let's go to the newsroom.
Good afternoon and welcome to the broadcast. I'm Family Life News anchor Sarah Harnish. Shockwave. There's widespread chaos in Myanmar today after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake. Asian correspondent Ann Corin.
Temples and mosques just crumble. We know that there were worshippers inside. There is footage from Mandalay University, which is engulfed in flames. These black plumes of smoke just billowing from the university. There's bridges across rivers that have just collapsed.
This guy teaches in Thailand, 18 hours to the south.
I actually thought that it was just vertigo for a second. And then some other teachers started walking out of the buildings and they were saying, can you feel that? And then that's when I realized, it's not just vertigo. We're all feeling this and it's an earthquake.
At least 150 are dead. President Trump pledging support.
Yeah, we're going to be helping. We've already alerted the people. Yeah, it's terrible what's happened.
Vice President J.D. Vance spent his lunch break in Greenland eating with our troops on an American military base.
Please, eat. Seriously, Guardian.
He told them if America doesn't invest in Greenland, China will.
Russia and China and other nations are taking an extraordinary interest in Arctic passageways, in Arctic naval routes, and indeed in the minerals of the Arctic territories. We need to ensure that America is leading in the Arctic.
Chinook helicopters have dumped over 30,000 gallons of water over wildfires. They're in South and North Carolina. In fact, it is the largest fire in South Carolina state history. The blaze is being fed by debris on the ground from Hurricane Helene.
You can see how intense the flames got when the fire came through here.
They're all over the place. There's some 500 fires affecting nearly 10,000 acres.
Western North Carolina has never had this much fuel on the forest floor within living memory.
Those fires 0% contained with no rain in the forecast until Monday. President Trump was on the phone today talking tariffs with Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney. He wasn't too happy about that call.
Our response to these latest tariffs is to fight, to protect, and to build.
CBS reporter Linda Kenyon has more.
On Truth Social, President Trump said the two agree on many things and that they will be meeting right after Canada's elections. The phone call between the president and the prime minister comes amid bad feelings in Canada, stirred up by Trump's promised 25% trade tariffs on Canadian cars.
The White House has asked the U.S. Supreme Court for permission to deport Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. CBS reporter Scott McFarland.
This always seemed destined for the U.S. Supreme Court, that the Trump administration was always keen on getting this thing up to the highest levels because they want to use this 1798 Alien Enemies Act to expedite the deportations of suspected foreign nationals or foreign gang members. The Alien Enemies Act gives the president more power.
A lower court judge this afternoon extended the flight ban through April 12th. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. was in West Virginia today celebrating that state, which just removed food dyes from school lunches.
President Trump said that he wants to make America healthy again. We cannot have a strong country if we have sick citizens.
While he was there, Utah became the first state in the country to ban fluoride in public drinking water. Some of the 2,000 corrections officers fired by New York State following a wildcat strike rallied in Albany Thursday to continue to press their case to state leaders that prisons must be safer.
Prisons within New York State are not safe for anyone, not just officers, not just the incarcerated, not just civilians, and not just visitors.
The former officers called for a meeting with state lawmakers. And Hershey's Kiss has made a bid to become Pennsylvania's official state candy. The project started with a student initiative by kids in Bucks County, and now there's a bill set to be introduced that would make the Hershey Kiss a first in the nation state candy and even drum up a little tourism cash with a potential sweet and salty trail through Hershey's Chocolate District. Milton Hershey's chocolate business has been in Pennsylvania Pennsylvania for 130 years. Still to come on the 5 o'clock report, physician-assisted suicide in Pennsylvania, fairness in girls' sports. It's all on the discussion table with Michael Gear and Jason McGuire. Capital Connection up next after weather with Ken McKinley.
Temperatures bottoming out in the 40s in most areas this evening and then rising a bit overnight. For tomorrow, look for some very warm temperatures for much of New York and Pennsylvania, 60s and even 70s in Pennsylvania. But north of the New York Thruway, it will be cooler with clouds and some rain there and temperatures staying in the 40s and 50s. More rain tomorrow night in those areas to the north and temperatures dipping perhaps into the 30s along the Lake Ontario shoreline. Could even be a spot of freezing rain in some locations. And then warmer temperatures across the board on Sunday, 40s to the north, 60s to the south, clouds and some occasional precipitation.
Thank you, Ken. It is Friday, and that means it's time to check in with our own Bob Price and the Capital Connection crew for a peek at what's happening in both state capitals in New York and Pennsylvania. Let's listen in.
Michael, let's talk about something that, we talk about every year in New York, but now we've got to talk about it in Pennsylvania because there's been legislation introduced in Harrisburg that would permit physician-assisted suicide. This is modeled after Oregon's so-called Death with Dignity Act. Explain a little bit what this legislation is all about.
Yeah, this bill was introduced just this past Friday on March 21st by a number of progressive Democrats in the House of Representatives. Lead sponsor is Tariq Khan, who's a Muslim, explicitly against the Muslim religion to support physician-assisted suicide. But there are some who might call themselves Christians who also support it, and that's very problematic. When we look at this issue, I look at New York and the great work that Jason has done up there and fighting it off there in his state, and we here in Pennsylvania will be doing the same. We don't expect this to move in the General Assembly ultimately. There still is significant opposition, and it won't go anywhere if it gets out of the House, and we don't expect it will. It's a bad idea. We look at Canada, and we see growth in physician-assisted suicide, as they called it, by about 30% every year since it's been legalized, and in even some countries, they're now allowing children to participate in it. It's awful, and we will fight it.
That is a slippery slope if there ever was one. Jason, Governor Hochul signed legislation recently that expands this SHIELD law. Some call it the Abortion Provider Protection Act. Why is she so keen on providing this anonymity to those involved in the abortion industry?
Yeah, you have to recognize that with the progressives and with the left, there is a very vocal minority of the base there that really is demanding these kinds of things. And so when you see at the federal level various pro-life actions that are moving, there's a reaction here at the state level. I just don't see how it helps women's health and safety to conceal the names of doctors or the medical practice that is prescribing some of these drugs that cause abortions. It's allowing cases such as in Louisiana, where this girl received these drugs that her mother slipped her, essentially, caused some medical problems for her, and that didn't help that young girl's safety. And I just don't see how it's going to help women in New York to be concealing this kind of data. We don't do it for any other kind of medication or drug. Why do it for abortion drugs?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of this issue, Michael, there was a really just gut-wrenching story out of Lancaster County recently that kind of highlights the rot of the abortion industry. In this case, the chemical abortion industry, which is a growing enterprise. Pardon the graphic nature of this story, but I think it's important that we understand what happened here and why this happened in Lancaster County.
Yeah, so the case involves a 17-year-old girl in Lancaster County. Authorities discovered a baby that was buried in the backyard of her home, and when they investigated further, it turns out that this girl was pregnant, about 21 weeks pregnant. She went to an abortion clinic with her mother. They told her the baby is too far along and we can't do it. And so then the mother helped to get her mail order chemical abortion drugs. And she took them and then was shocked when she gave birth to basically a live baby. She expressed that, it's breathing, and was so troubled by it, but then just ended up burying it in the backyard. So there's investigation and prosecution going on in the case. It just shows the terrible devastation that comes with chemical abortions, not only a baby dying in that situation, but a young lady who I think will be scarred for life.
Yeah. Jason, a study out, and you're talking about this on your website, we'll give that at the end, seems to contradict the narrative regarding gender dysphoria. I know you had Brandon Showalter at the Christian Post last week talk about this issue so eloquently. This idea of gender-affirming care may actually be harming, not helping, the mental health of the people that seek out this treatment. movement. Explain that if you would.
Yeah, this study really runs contradictory to the narrative we so often hear. But it's a recent study published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, and it suggests that gender-affirming surgery may harm, not help, the mental health of persons with gender dysphoria. Specifically, the study indicates that people with gender dysphoria who undergo gender-affirming surgery have demonstrably worse mental health outcomes than people with gender dysphoria who do not. And again, that just runs so contradictory to the narrative that we hear. We are often told these people have to have the so-called sex change surgeries or the gender-affirming care to really feel good about themselves, to feel right in their bodies, when in reality, the studies are now indicating something different. And it shouldn't surprise us because God's created us as male and female. It's true at every single chromosome level of our body. And so if we are rejecting that at that molecular level, certainly there's going to be problems at a higher level as well.
Michael, let's talk about President Trump's alma mater, UPenn. He's withholding $175 million in aid from that school. And of course, if UPenn rings a bell, that is the school where Leah Thomas used to swim, formerly known as Will Thomas. Do you think this action to deal with the trans athletes in women's sports will be enough to convince UPenn to change its ways?
Well, I certainly hope so, and I think probably at least they'll make some window dressing on it to suggest that they're making the change. But we've seen consistently resistance in places like Maine, even the Philadelphia School District, that face a loss of federal fundings, continue to press forward and to say ideologically they think that transgender people should be able to participate in these sports. So I think that the pressure from Washington will make a difference to some degree, but it's an indication that we at the grassroots level need to continue to be involved and to get even local school districts involved to push fairness in girls' sports.
You can subscribe, listen to, and share Capital Connection and all of Family Life's original podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or at familylife.org. Time next for tonight's market report brought to you by Faithward Advisors. Stocks are closing sharply lower to end the week on Wall Street. At the final bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 715 points to 41,583. The S&P 500 lost 112 points to 5580. The Nasdaq dropped 481 points to 17,322. Faithward Advisors is a Christian financial planning firm online at faithwardadvisors.com.
Today I have 3 questions worth thinking deeply about. Hi, I'm Rob West with your Faith and Finance Minute. The questions come from financial planner George Kinder. The first is, what would you do if you had all the time and money in the world? Second, how would you live if you knew you had only 5 to 10 years left? And third, what would you most regret if you die tomorrow? Now, as for the first one, you're not likely to have all the time and money in the world, but the question clarifies what's in your heart regarding your resources. The second question will prompt you to think about how to focus your life. And the third one can help you avoid regret at the end of life. Think about these things and ask God to help you with the answers. Discover the best Christian financial articles, podcasts, and videos by visiting our website, faithfi.com, or by downloading FaithFi, Faith and Finance from your app store.
Coming up on the 5 o'clock report, groups of churches in the Pennsylvania Poconos are banding together to feed the hungry. That story after weather.
This is meteorologist Ken McKinley with our Family Life forecast. Look for some rain in New York areas as we head through this evening. Just clouds and maybe a shower or two in Pennsylvania. Temperatures bottoming out in the 40s in most areas this evening and then rising a bit overnight. For tomorrow, look for some very warm temperatures for much of New York and Pennsylvania. 60s and even 70s in Pennsylvania. But north of the New York Thruway, it will be cooler with clouds and some rain there and temperatures staying in the 40s and 50s. More rain tomorrow night in those areas to the north and temperatures dipping perhaps into the 30s along the Lake Ontario shoreline. Could even be a spot of freezing rain in some locations, and then warmer temperatures across the board on Sunday. 40s to the north, 60s to the south, clouds and some occasional precipitation.
Thank you, Ken. Finally, at 5, churches throughout Pennsylvania's Poconos Mountains are banding together with the borough of Stroudsburg to develop a long-term plan for a community food pantry. Borough manager Larry Kopp tells WNEP.
A lot of people who come to the food bank here that don't have automobiles. So we need something here in town where we can actually people can walk to. We don't have a lot of empty the real estate in the borough. So we've got our eyes open as we develop this food pantry.
More than 10% of all Pennsylvania households experience food insecurity, meaning they don't know where their next meal is coming from. These churches are saying it's time to make a difference. And that's the world that we live in for Friday, the 28th of March. I'm Sarah Harnish, and this is the 5 o'clock report on Family Life.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.